Right, Robert, we have just had an excellent, by you, overview of the Agile Leader approach. And what I'd like to do now is to go through with you your slides again and say, okay, what are the issues, the realities here? What are the challenges? So show us slide number 1 beyond your title, please. Removing roadblocks. To me, that's what it's all about, isn't it? It's about saying, look, there are things in the way of being an Agile leader. What is there to say about that?
Yeah, I think in terms of removing the roadblocks, I think it's about, this is about having the trust piece, that the people at the front line of the business who hold the information know where the roadblocks are.
Yeah, they do.
Looking towards the leader to say, show us the roadblocks. Now, the leader may have their own view strategically of where the roadblocks are, but sometimes sometimes these roadblocks are smaller and they start at the bottom and they build. So I think it's going to the source, go where the knowledge is.
Yeah, I mean, you're speaking reality, aren't you? And I think a realistic leader of an organization or a unit knows this, and too few of them are in that space.
Then this has a lot to do with organizational size as well. You know, if you're one business with 10 employees and you're the owner, okay, you're going to be seeing things for yourself.
Yeah,
but as the organization expands and gets bigger, this is where this gets more difficult. It's like workplace culture. As a business expands, there's a real challenge in maintaining workplace culture. So there's similarities there. Yeah,
there are, and it's also for me about humility. It's a leader at any stage. Owner leaders in an early stage of an organization's growth having the humility of saying, well, I used to know everybody in this organization. I used to know everything that went on in this organization. We've grown to a point, and it isn't very big, where that isn't the case anymore. Show us slide number 2, because it's got some good detail on it. I like this. Here we go. I like the pictures.
So yeah, I like this. I hadn't come across this in this form, Iceberg of Ignorance, by Sydney Yoshida. But you know, as I say, it was 1989. So back then, when you put your lens on of 1989, you say, well, actually, in 1989, was there a view that all leaders need to know everything in order to lead?
Oh, well, I've got an answer to that, possibly.
Yeah. Whereas I think now, a lot of people would look at this and say it is potentially quite outdated now.
Yeah, and I guess when we talked about this before you put the detail on it, the comment I made was, I still come across managers, I wouldn't call them leaders, who say, I wouldn't ask anyone to do anything I couldn't do myself. And to me, that's so limiting. That's about a leader or a manager or an owner saying, people are only as good as me at whatever it is they do in this organization. And that's a badly run organization. To me, a leader should be a facilitating person that encourages and takes delight in people being better than them at everything they do.
Yeah, we see a lot of quotations, don't we, about this, about, you know, hire people smarter than you.
Yes.
You know,
Jobs was saying it back in the 80s. We're talking 80s.
Yeah, exactly. So then this kind of summary of the role, and this inclusive piece. And
what does it mean? What does it mean, Robert? What does inclusive mean?
For me, when you're an inclusive leader, I think that to me says, I think of non-hierarchical when I think of inclusive. Very, very much. We're in this together, regardless of role, title, whatever it might be. So that's really what I see inclusive coming in, and the job of the Agile leader then is to state the why and have the trust that other people will know how to deliver the how with their knowledge and expertise, and having the knowledge that we've talked about in the iceberg there. But also that they continually talk about how autonomy and collaboration is key to getting results, and having that trust that people will collaborate with who they know and that they need to collaborate with to get the results, and not have to be told to go and collaborate with people.
And I think some of that is to do with ego, isn't it? It's about parking the ego, and leaders need ego. You can't be a leader without an ego. Something has to drive you, so you have to get your energy from somewhere. And so I'm in favor of ego, but a managed ego. And I think to have an ego which inhibits the ability to see talent in people around you is horribly diminishing.
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. And we talk on the next slide about,
Show us it. It's a lot on it.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, there is. Yeah, no, there is. Talking here about engagement and stuff, when I was saying about, pay me fairly, pay me fairly, tell me when I'm doing a good job. We talk about engagement surveys. I've seen a lot of engagement surveys in different businesses over the years, done in different ways. But essentially, we have two parts to that: qualitative and quantitative feedback.
Yep.
And quantitative is important. It shows you how healthy the business is as a snapshot in particular areas. But the qualitative stuff is where the feeling comes from. And often in those surveys, when I've looked through the qualitative data, you're seeing words like recognition, praise, thanks, reward, all that stuff that people are saying, do more of that. And that's the non-high cost stuff to do, but often the stuff that gets missed and forgotten.
No, isn't it just? I couldn't agree more, because I don't know. I do feel there's a disconnect. When we go back to your pyramid, I do feel there's a disconnect between. This is why television programs like The Boss Does a Day's Work are such good entertainment, because they're entertainment. They're not reality. If it was what went on every day, there wouldn't be a need to run television programs on it. If there was, and yeah, you're right. And I'm not without compassion for people who run organizations. It's a really hard thing to do. And in big organizations, I'm talking about the multi-everything organizations, it's impossible to make contact with and connect with everybody. But of course it is. So it's about mechanisms. Nonetheless, the reality is, typically, past a certain point, people at whatever the top means should know they don't know what other people do hierarchically, or in the lower hierarchy, as I call it. And it's about connecting those up. It shouldn't be too difficult. Yeah,
no, absolutely. But it is. And I reflect on myself and say, God, did I do it enough? Say it enough? Maybe not. There's lots of people who will probably reflect on this and go, right, I must try harder, like being back at school, must try harder. But it's I don't think a lot of it's through want. I think it's just the busyness of everything.
And I forgive people for their imperfections more than I used to. I used to get really frustrated going into an organization. I've worked for myself for 30 years. I think, why don't they see what I can? And I think that's probably why I'm here, though, isn't it? It's about, I'm the person who says, have you thought about this? When I'm really saying, let me tell you how to run your business. And it's about joining. And I know we haven't got time to go through the full detail of all this, and you've done that in your overview, but I'm just picking out things here, like taking culture seriously. The best definition I've ever heard of culture that I use all the time is the way things are done around here. And that's not just the whole organization, it's a unit of the way things are done around here. And sometimes, as you said in the overview recording, that fits with the values and the person that someone is. Other times it doesn't. So sometimes there's a clear culture clash, a clash of values between the people in a unit or organization and the organization or unit itself.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, I agree with that. The motivation one, I mean, they're all key, and I kind of in the overview spoke about how important trust is, but taking motivation as an example, and I do feel quite strongly about the motivation through words and actions. Reputation, for example, they say reputation is built on what you do and what you say. I think
absolutely,
essentially the same is here. Your reputation as a leader, manager, on motivation is what you do and what you say. Words have impact. A few words to a person timed right in the best way can last a lifetime to people.
And that goes. You mentioned emotional intelligence earlier. You did in the first recording. All the Goldman stuff, and before him, Mayer and Salovey, and all the folk who talk about emotional intelligence, self-awareness. So many people in organizations with responsibility for others seem to be losing their self-awareness with each hierarchical step they take. So part of this disconnect, this lack of awareness of organizational practice and issues, is born of a lack of self-awareness. People think they're more connected than they really are. People feel that they're the same person they used to be. Well, no, they're not. and other people make judgments of them that are inconsistent with their judgments of themselves.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's over time, been a handful of people that you observe, and they change as people as they get a promotion, and it's interesting. It's maybe another complete subject, but it is interesting how.
Is this a self-reflection going on here, Robert?
Well, no. Some people feel they need to change about who they are when they move up an organization, and absolutely they don't need to change who they are. The essence of who they are, you'd like to think, is why they got the
absolutely. Yeah, I think that's true, because any changes have got to be purposeful. They've got to be, how can I say this? They've got to be embedded in something cohesive. You don't just change for change's sake. It's got to be a good reason, or you're changing constantly in reaction to events. And I think ultimately people are who they are. I once read something ages ago: people can't change, they can make changes. In other words, you are always who you are, your personality, your disposition, but you can react, you can respond, you can play around with the edges, but ultimately you're the same person. And I think the people who do this whole agile leadership thing best, that clear roadblocks from others, that do all this good stuff, are those that are of the very, very few. My favorite number for leaders I've observed in 40 years is 2. Both of them could do this stuff. Both of them recognized they didn't know it all. Both of them had mechanisms in place that said, I'm going to get out there and connect with people who know more about this organization than I do.